All right. Let's dive into this whole non-resident landlord scheme thing. It's a mouthful, I know, but trust me, it's a lot more interesting than it sounds. Especially if you're thinking of renting out a UK property, but, you actually live somewhere else.
It's true. Think of it like this. You might have managed to move away from the UK, but that doesn't mean you've escaped the watchful eye of HMRC.
HMRC.
The UK tax authority, basically. And today, we're using their own rule book to decode how it all works, their official guidance on property income.
So we're like going straight to the source.
Exactly. And the main takeaway is this. If you're earning rental income from a UK property, HMRC wants their share no matter where in the world you are.
No escaping the tax man, huh? But hold on, what about those double taxation treaties you hear about? Don't those prevent you from being taxed twice on the same income?
Yeah. They definitely come into play, but they don't completely wipe away your UK tax obligations. Think of them more like potential relief in your country of residence.
So it's not about avoiding taxes altogether. It's more about making sure you're only paying what you owe where you owe it.
Right on. And to understand that, we need to figure out who's who in this whole rental scenario.
Okay, so who are the main players?
Well, first off, we've got you, the non-resident landlord, obviously. Then you've potentially got a letting agent, someone taking care of the property for you.
Right. And of course, let's not forget the tenants, the ones actually living there and paying the rent.
Absolutely. But this is where things get a bit interesting. The definition of a letting agent for HMRC can be pretty broad.
Broad? What do you mean?
It's not just about those big-name letting agencies. Even a friend or a family member who helps collect rent or organize some repairs, they could be considered a letting agent under these rules.
Wow, so even lending a hand with the property could land someone with unexpected tax responsibilities.
It just goes to show how important it is to understand the ins and outs of this scheme.
Okay, so before we get lost in the details, let's take it back to the beginning. You mentioned all of this depends on whether someone is a non-resident landlord. How do they figure that out? Is it as simple as looking at your passport?
Not quite. HMRC doesn't just look at your nationality. It's more about your usual place of abode.
Usual place of abode.
It sounds fancy, but it really just means where you usually live. Where you spend most of your time.
So even if someone spends a few months in the UK for work or holiday, that doesn't automatically make them a UK resident for this whole NRLS thing.
Exactly. It's about a pattern of life. And here's something else to consider. You could actually be considered a UK tax resident in a particular year. Maybe you spent a significant amount of time there, but still be classified as a non-resident landlord for this scheme if your usual home is outside the UK.
So it's possible to be paying UK taxes on other income but still fall under these rules for a rental property. It's a bit of a maze.
You could say that. And it's not just individual landlords either. Companies, partnerships, trusts, anyone earning rental income from a UK property while living overseas. They all need to pay attention to these rules.
So we've got all these landlords, letting agents, even tenants sometimes trying to figure out this whole NRLS thing.
It's true. Everyone's got a role to play.
And you mentioned earlier that even tenants can get pulled into this whole tax situation.
Oh, absolutely. It's one of those things people don't always expect.
Can you refresh my memory on how that works again?
Sure. So, if a tenant is paying over £100 a week in rent, and they're paying it directly to an overseas landlord, no letting agent in the middle, they might actually have to deduct tax from the rent themselves and send it straight to HMRC.
Really? Directly to HMRC? That's wild.
Yeah, it's all spelled out right here in the guidance.
I bet that comes as a surprise to a lot of tenants. Nobody expects to be filing tax paperwork just because they're renting a place.
You'd be surprised. That's why it's so important for everyone involved, landlords, tenants, everyone to be on the same page about this stuff.
Absolutely. So let's say you're an overseas landlord and you want to make sure you're playing by HMRC's rules. What are your options? What's the game plan?
Well, there are basically two paths you can take. The first is what we were talking about before. Your letting agent, or sometimes the tenant, takes the tax out of your rental income right away before sending you your share.
So that's the taxman gets paid first approach.
Exactly. It's straightforward in a way. But, as we said, those quarterly and annual returns are crucial. You can't just forget about them. Now, the other option is where things get a bit more interesting. You can apply to HMRC to receive your rental income gross.
Gross. That sounds nice. Does that mean no UK tax deductions at all? Like a free pass?
Hold your horses. It's important to remember that gross rent doesn't mean you're off the hook for UK taxes completely.
Oh, okay.
Think of it more like a pay later kind of deal.
So it's like HMRC is saying, we trust you'll sort out the taxes yourself later on.
That's the general idea. You're basically promising HMRC that you'll declare this rental income on your UK tax return and pay whatever you owe. It just shifts the responsibility for deducting and paying that tax from the letting agent or tenant to you, the landlord.
Got it. So what's the catch? I'm guessing HMRC isn't just handing out gross rent approvals to anyone who asks.
You're right, it's not quite that simple. HMRC wants to be sure you're a trustworthy taxpayer. They're going to look at your tax history, any ties you have to the UK, and whether you've been paying your other tax liabilities on time.
So they're looking for any red flags that might suggest you're not going to keep your end of the bargain?
Exactly. Think of the gross rent option as a privilege, not a right, because HMRC takes it very seriously.
Okay, so let's say I'm feeling brave and I want to give this gross rent thing a shot. What do I actually need to do to apply?
Well, you'll need to find the right form on HMRC's website. You got a specific one for this.
And I bet a strongly worded email won't cut it right.
You'd be surprised what some people try. But yeah, you'll need to fill out the form. And make sure you're using the most up-to-date version, because they do change them sometimes. Oh, and send it to the correct address. They're really picky about that.
Noted. So no chance of just, winging it.
Not really. Accuracy is key here.
Right, so even if I do everything perfectly, there's still a chance HMRC could say no.
That's right. Just because you apply doesn't mean you'll automatically get approved. HMRC has the final say, and they can refuse applications. Or even withdraw approval later on if they have concerns.
So it's not over till it's over.
Exactly.
Okay, so let's say the worst happens, and I get that dreaded rejection letter from HMRC. What are my options then? Do I just have to accept it?
Not necessarily. You can appeal their decision, but you need to be quick about it.
How quick are we talking?
You've got 90 days from the date of the decision to appeal.
That's not a lot of time to lick your wounds. So how does appealing actually work?
You need to write to HMRC explaining why you think their decision was wrong, and include any evidence you have to support your case. If that doesn't work, you can potentially take it a step further. There's something called the First-Tier Tax Tribunal.
So it's like taking HMRC to court over taxes.
Pretty much. It shows how seriously they take this whole NRLS thing.
This has been a wild ride. We've gone through who the NRLS applies to, how it works, the potential problems, and even what to do if things go wrong.
It's all about being prepared.
Absolutely. And remember, everyone, this is just the tip of the iceberg. Tax laws are complicated, and they can change at any time, so it's important to stay informed. And if you're an overseas landlord with a UK property, it's always a good idea to do your research, or even talk to a professional to make sure you're on top of everything.
Couldn't agree more. A little bit of knowledge can go a long way.
It really can. Well, on that note, I think we've reached the end of our deep dive into the NRLS.
Until next time.
And remember, everyone, stay curious.